glad you decided to join us for All-Terrain Marriages Session 3. Number 3 of this 8-part series designed specifically for missionary marriages. And our hope is that since our last session, you have kept that conversation alive by taking advantage of the discussion guide we put together for you. And we really just desire that these times be a spark that ignites some great conversations between you and your spouse. So during our first 2 sessions, we took a look at the first of our 4 words that we're unpacking together. And our goal is to become couples that can traverse any terrain we have in front of us with grace and success, and perhaps a few sparks of passion too. And the first word we introduced was location. We had talked about the importance of recognizing that the ground we're standing on in our marriages is holy ground, and that we find ourselves standing there with a level of marital energy. We also saw that with fresh intentionality and awareness of ourselves and of each other, we can really better support each other along in the journey. So in this session today, we want to introduce the second word, lubrication. Okay, now I know this is a word that could mean lots of different things, and you're probably wondering where we're going with this. So let me tell you. Remember our series analogy is all-terrain vehicles, right? Okay, so think, what does lubrication mean to a vehicle? So when we talk about automotive lubricants, we're most often talking motor oil. You know, what you use in an oil change. Fun fact, back in the day, I actually worked for an automotive company for nearly 9 years. And checking your oil levels and getting oil changes is one of the most important and basic things you need to do for your vehicle. So what does a lubricant do? Okay, check out this list from repairsmith.com, and let's imagine this list isn't about a car, but about your marriage. Lubricant reduces friction between engine parts, prevents wear and tear, dissipates the heat and maintains the temperature, protects from oxidization. No, I think I said that wrong. Oxidation and corrosion. It keeps the engine clean, and it carries the contaminants. It dampens and cushions the engine components under high stress. How great is that list? So we know missionary marriages are under an extra lot of wear and tear, heat, all those words we just heard, high stress, friction, and exposure to contaminants. So for us, lubrication is essential. Without it, things seize up, they overheat, they melt down, they lock up. So how does a missionary lubricate their marriage? Okay, we're not going to go tell you to go buy a dozen roses right now. We actually want to take you to a story in the Bible that you're not going to expect. What about kids? Wait, hey, this is a marriage teaching. I know. Hang with me. It's the story in Matthew 18, 2-3, where Jesus' disciples ask him the question of who the greatest is in his kingdom. Let's read it together. Jesus called a little child to him and put the child among them. Then he said, I tell you the truth, unless you turn from your sins and become like little children, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven.
You know, Stephanie, for the longest time, I used to internalize these verses as almost a divine threat. You know, you better get your boomer self together and be childish if you think you're going to get to heaven, all adult-like and responsible. Like, what are you thinking? It almost felt like there was this layer of annoyance that I had placed upon the words of Jesus here. Like he was bugged. And he was giving me some kind of like divine ultimatum to stop and revert or else. And of course, that is not at all what he's trying to get across here. This is not a threat or some ultimatum that he's giving. He's giving a true statement about compatibility with his kingdom. Mm-hmm. Like any other kingdom, the kingdom of Jesus has a culture. Yeah. They're not just the things that we do for his kingdom, but there's this atmosphere that is created when we do the things that he's instructed us to do. And really, he's making a point that children seem to get it easier. Kingdom culture comes natural to them. Yeah. He's telling his disciples the truth that, man, unless you are like these children, unless you let go of certain things, like sin, unless you cling to those things that make these little children so alive, you're just not going to feel like you fit in or that you're making sense of what my kingdom is all about. You're going to feel like perhaps a graduate student during a first grade recess. You know, there's something about little children that is so compatible with the kingdom that we run the risk of losing when we get too grown up, when we get too heady and too serious and too old-spirited. And I think he wanted this statement to make his disciples think a little bit and to get curious about what those things may be. Perhaps those things may be something that they let go of long ago and that they needed to recapture in their relationship with him.
Yeah.
So let's start a list together. Right where you're at, take out a piece of paper, take out your notebook that you've been filling in, and let's come to a few ideas and make a list of some of the qualities that children have. Let's work on this together even. Mm-hmm. Qualities like creativity, imagination. I mean, if you think about it, Stephanie, kids are easy to amuse.
They laugh at everything.
I love that about them. They're joyful. One of the ones that is really important that I love is that they're quick to forgive. Have you ever noticed how they can get in a fight one minute and be really mad at each other, and then the next minute they're best friends again, playing together and like nothing ever happened? They also ask freely for what they need.
Yeah.
That's something beautiful. And they can be bold about it.
Yeah.
They can actually be very specific about what they need as well. They have no problem about being dependent. There's no shame in that for them. And they're curious, and they have the humility to ask questions that they don't have the answers for. Kids also speak their mind freely.
Yeah, they do.
And you know what I love? I love that they're funny. You know, we could go on making this list. But there's this quality of compatibility with the kingdom that we want to talk about. And we suggest today that it makes a great lubricant. It's going to make a great motor oil for our relationships. And that is the childlike quality of playfulness.
Yes.
And if children are good at something, it's this ability to be playful. You know, if we want to be those all-terrain marriages, this is a quality that we're going to have to be intentional about making some room for. You know, we could spend a lot of time talking about kicking the tires of our ATV, checking the strength of the chassis and measuring the horsepower of our engines, perhaps looking at the octane of the fuel. But we know that if we don't have oil in the motor, that none of those things really matter. Yeah. We're not going to get far before everything begins to seize up and overheat. Mm-hmm. See, as missionaries, I'm sure that you have your own stories and anecdotes of seeing, perhaps riding in, or even owning some pretty unlikely all-terrain vehicles, right? In the places that you serve. Perhaps you too have seen those two-person motorcycles that are carrying a family of 5 somehow comfortably, bringing the groceries home on unpaved roads like it's no big deal.
With no helmets.
No helmets on. Or maybe in your city you also had, like we did in Lima, we had those motorcycle rickshaws that would put some Ford trucks to shame, right? You're wondering, how on earth did they get that many crates of mangoes to fit on that thing? They make it look like a piece of cake. See, as missionaries, we know that a lot can get done with unlikely vehicles. We've seen what can be surprisingly done with an old lawnmower motor and a couple of skateboard tires and the creativity in a sizable margin for risk. See, you may be feeling like you don't have the best tires. We don't have the strongest chassis or the beefiest motor. We don't have a tank full of rocket fuel. We're not well funded like everyone else. But listen, a little bit of playfulness can go a long way. You'd be surprised at how much terrain you can get across with this quality.
Yeah. You know, as missionaries, we're so invested in looking at the culture of the place we're going to live in. We got to look at kingdom culture. That's the number one culture we all live in, because we live in that culture. We represent a king, and bringing the values that are compatible with this kingdom that supersedes all kingdoms into our marriage is so important, especially in helping keep us from overheating during stressful seasons of life. So let's become students of kingdom culture, you guys. There's just something about this childlike quality of playfulness, I think, that can transform something that feels like a sudden drop into the drop of a roller coaster ride. Or it can take this crazy blizzard and turn it into a snow day. Or take the choppy seas and make it a great day for surfing. Playfulness just has this way of reminding us that underneath whatever it is that our spouse is carrying, there's still that childlike friend that knows how to make you smile, or who sees you and still enjoys you and knows where your funny bone is. Playfulness helps us enjoy one another.
Yeah.
Even when our circumstances in life are just not enjoyable at the time. At the right times, playfulness invites humor into crises, and it helps to give us this healthy perspective on things while also relieving some pressure when things get tense. Sometimes when things are tense or we're both just stressed out of our gourd, something Danny and I do is we just make weird faces at each other. Really? And that's our cue to chill out. That's our thing. I'm sure you have your things. Obviously, there are times that would be a terrible idea. So as you're doing playfulness, learn to read the room and recognize when it's time to be quiet and listen, and when it might be a moment to lighten the tension with some playfulness. There's actually a name for some of these intentional playful moments that we do in tense situations. So there's this marriage researcher. He is one of the foremost relationship experts. His name is Dr. John Gottman. And in his research, he discovered that one of the primary factors to a couple flourishing in marriage, we want to flourish in our marriage, is a couple's ability to navigate what he calls repair attempts. What is a repair attempt? In essence, this describes the couples who know how to do a redo in conflict. So when a conversation, for example, isn't going well, they know how to stop and redo, start over. His studies found this. So if a conversation has a harsh startup is the way we start our conversation. It's almost always going to have a harsh ending. But there's this thing you can do, is a repair attempt. A couple that can stop and go, whoa, hold on, let's redo that startup. Those couples have a way better chance of getting to their desired destination in the conversation. Because when we have a conversation, there's a desired destination. There's a place we want to get to. So the key, most times, to knowing how to do a repair attempt, a fresh redo, is playfulness or silliness. So in that scenario, a repair attempt might be a simple, seriously? Are you for real right now? Or it might be saying gently, hey, I'm guessing you did not mean that to be as harsh as it came out. Okay, this is not being passive aggressive. I know you did not mean to talk to me that way. Please let's not do that. That's not a repair attempt. It's being genuinely fun. It's blowing something off. It's giving your partner grace and the chance to just start over again. So maybe you're showing your partner a project that you worked really hard on, or you put on a new outfit that you love and you just really like to be complimented in it. Or maybe just you're trying to get their attention somehow and they blow it. They don't notice. Okay, when that has happened, for me, sometimes I just loudly compliment myself. Again, not in a passive aggressive way, because that's not funny. That's not playful. So, for example, I don't cook much at our house. Danny is the cook. He's amazing. So when I do, I feel real proud of myself. And if Danny has maybe forgotten to acknowledge the awesomeness of my meal, I don't get offended. I just tell myself how awesome it is. I do, literally out loud. Stephanie, oh my word, you made this? It is awesome. It is like the best thing I have ever eaten. And then I just talk back to myself. I know, right? It's pretty phenomenal. Yes, you are an amazing cook. And then we just usually bust out laughing. And Danny's like, oh yeah. And he tells me how much he likes my food. And I just assume, of course, he's telling me the truth. So I think what we're saying in all this is lubricating the gears with a bit of playfulness, and a little can go a long way, will help us from overheating when the going gets tough. Laughing with each other goes a long way towards easing the stress of life and ministry. And hey, even sometimes in our intimate times as a couple, a silly redo is what it takes to get us back to an incredibly passionate moment. Like, we've done that.
Listen, it's okay for those around you to see you both have fun with each other. Yeah. It's okay for the community that you're serving to see you flirt together, in fact. See, more than okay, I believe it is something that makes the influence God wants us to have in our lives and in our mission become even more attractive. We always hesitate to give prescriptions in this kind of space because all of us are so very different.
Yeah.
And we find that descriptions are always more lasting than prescriptions when it comes to relationships. See, you may find playfulness with words, right? You may be the type that you get in these creative banter or pun sparring. Others of you may find playfulness in something competitive, like a board game or some sport that you guys share together. Others may find playfulness in saying something borderline suggestive that makes the other person blush a little bit because they have the inside story. Listen, there are so many ways to embrace this quality. I mean, you can embrace it with spontaneity, or you can embrace it with detailed planning. It can be a quick dance in the kitchen or an Olympic level staring contest when you're in a boring meeting, right? In fact, let's take a minute. Pull out your notebook again. Take out that piece of paper, and we want to ask a question of you. We want you to think, if you invited your spouse, kind of like when we were kids, you invited them to come out and play with you. What would you invite them to do? What sounds fun to you? What would be a playful thing to do? What would put a smile on your face and bring out that silly kid side? Why don't we take a moment, pause the video, and write some of those things down?
And we know that for some of you this could be hard, so we have some images to spark your imagination. So just take a look at them and then pause the video and take a few minutes to jot an idea down or two.
Great job. Hopefully that whetted your appetite for some more fun in your relationship. There's probably some of you that have a list that's a mile long, and others of you who could barely write down a word. And listen, that's okay. Today really is meant to just be one of those moments where the fun gears in your relationship begin getting oiled up again and they begin turning again. Because if you think about it, isn't a 4x4 one of those vehicles that it's not just about surviving the terrain? I mean, have you seen or ridden in an ATV? Seen a commercial of a 4x4 flying through the mud with people having such a fun time? It's because they are. They're fun. They're meant to make for an amazing ride. And really that's the point that we're trying to make in this session. Make time for a fun time. With all the diverse terrains that we have to maneuver, and sometimes the terrains that shift and change so suddenly as we've seen them do over the last couple years, we better oil up and get these gears in good condition if we're planning on getting far. And can I just point one thing out? Being that we're all married, we're all missionaries, so can I just say it? When the missionary budget is tight, and you can't afford to go somewhere for a fancy dinner or take a long vacation or get that unexpected gift for one another, that's when we as missionaries, we can thank God for the gift of sex and that it's a free thing and it's entirely God's idea. Friends, don't tell me God isn't playful. When he came up with this legitimate strategy for stress relief and immunity boosting, I mean, Stephanie, how many times did we find ourselves thinking, well, it would have been nice to be able to go somewhere and do something together after a stressful week? That would have been nice, but the funds aren't really there for it. But that's okay. It's going to be way cheaper, and I think it's going to be a lot funner to stay home and make some fun for ourselves.
Danny said we wouldn't give any prescriptions. So we're not, but let me just give you one, we'll call it an idea or an example of playfulness that's come in clutch for us since the beginning of our marriage. So we call this car dancing.
Okay, here we go.
But we've done this in all kinds of transportation. We've done this on walks. We've done this in taxis, in friends' cars, in moto taxis. I don't think we've ever done this on a public bus. I probably wouldn't recommend it there. Once we did on horseback though. So if we notice a flat moment or a tough day, or we were just anticipating this really stressful event, or my gosh, how many times have we had our daughters in the back seat and they were grumpy or tired or fighting and whining, and we were like, okay, it's time. And one of us would play one of our go-to car dance songs. Yes, we have go-to car dance songs. And we would begin to dance in full view of everyone around us. Who cares? You know, you start with a little head bobble. You throw some shoulders in. And you just get as much of your upper body involved as is safe. Also, depending on who's driving, you can do a little more. And you just turn up the volume and you let loose. You don't have to know how to dance. I think, in fact, not knowing how to dance is maybe what makes car dancing even better. I think one of my favorite parts is when you catch glimpses of people in the cars or the buses next to you watching you. It's awesome. They're just like shocked or laughing or confused, or sometimes they'll just make fun of you and start dancing really awkwardly as well. It's awesome. It's just this form of levity. It's fun. It's random, and it's totally free. And you don't have to do it, but maybe you should try it.
Well, listen, we haven't secured a grant to study this thesis on car dancing, but it's our best guess that the divorce rate would plummet by an impressive 23% with the developments of some healthy, solid car dancing skills.
I think so.
And we believe that actually marriage satisfaction rate would skyrocket and increase by a whopping 88% if married people would just get over themselves for a second and have a little random fun. The point is this: guarding this childlike playfulness in our relationship goes a long way toward helping getting our marriage through some pretty narrow passes and tough terrains, difficult conversations, stressful moments. It keeps our gears from overheating. It's one of those effective lubricants that we need if we plan to be those all-terrain marriages. So friends, this is that moment. It's where we're going to say goodbye. We're going to leave you to continuing on with this conversation, perhaps a little car dancing right where you're sitting.
Whatever you do, make sure
Have
to have
fun.
some fun.